Okay, so attempting to pick off where I left off. To pick up where I left off. Okay, so we're in Genesis, right? And we're talking about how it goes from Elohim to Yahweh. Essentially, what happens is that the creator, Elohim, is mentioned, and then and explained to have created everything. And then Yahweh is mentioned and explained to have created the Eden matrix in which Adam and Eve exist, right? He tells them to be fruitful and multiply, and this is prior to them ever reproducing, and he walked with them every day. This is also prior to them being disconnected from source. Okay. Well, I'll get into it, I suppose. So I'm just going to tell the story as it goes according to the Bible, and then I'll break it down a little bit more. Okay. So Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and instantly become aware. Well, Eve eats of it first, and then she gives it to Adam. There is no consequence yet of any sin until she gives it to Adam, but as soon as he eats of it, they realize that they're naked, and they're overridden with guilt, and they craft clothes for themselves to cover their nakedness from each other and from God. They find themselves vulnerable and scared, because something has changed, and they were already warned that eating of the fruit would cause death, so they're assuming the worst, I assume. God comes down like he normally does. Yahweh comes like he normally does to talk with them and walk with them in the garden, and they're nowhere to be found. Of course, he knows where they're at, but they're hiding from God. And so he finds them hiding, and he's like, "Hey guys, what's up? What you doing back there?" They're like, "Oh, nothing." And he's like, "Well, come on out here." And they come out, and they're clothed, and they're covering their nakedness, and they are ridden with shame. And Yahweh immediately recognizes that, oh shit, y'all ate the apple, didn't you? And Adam's like, "Well, Eve gave it to me, and you gave me Eve, so technically this is all your fault." And Eve's like, "Well, I was tempted by the serpent." The reason Eve ate of the... In case you don't know the story, I'm assuming anybody watching this probably has already heard the story. In case you don't know the story, the reason that Eve eats of the fruit is because she happens to be near the tree. I don't know if it even matters where she's at or where it was that she was communicated to. There's a snake in the garden that talks and walks. He has legs and he can talk, but he's a serpent. He's like a dragon, right? And he comes on up and he's like, "Hey Eve, you ever thought about eating that fruit?" And she's like, "God told us not to eat that. He said that we could eat specifically anything but that, actually." And he's like, "Yeah, but you know why he said that, right?" She's like, "Well, because it will kill us." He's like, "Oh, it's not, it won't kill you. It just makes you not man anymore. It makes you like a god." She's kind of curious. And he's like, "Yeah, that's why God doesn't want you to eat it, is because he doesn't want you being anything like him. That's the issue here. No, if you eat of the fruit, you suddenly know everything that God knows, and it makes you like God." She's like, "Oh. He's like, "All right, see you later." But the seed of temptation had been placed, been sown, so it reaps a harvest in her. She decides to eat of the fruit, and then upon eating of the fruit, she shares it with Adam. That part isn't, like, it isn't discussed, like, what happens to her directly afterwards and prior to sharing it. We're not sure if she does that, like, just because she's like, hey, I did the thing, you should do the thing too. Like, kind of like a kid would. Or if she's like, oh shit, I'm fucked. Well, now I gotta fuck him up too, otherwise I'm gonna get all in trouble myself. Well, we don't really know. Right? As far as the story is concerned. Or if it was just like not even thinking. Maybe Adam was right there when the serpent was talking to her and she was the only one that communicated with it. Or the only one that could hear it, or something of that sort. Maybe she thought it was really, really good, and she was excited about these God powers, and she just wanted to share them with her husband. Okay, we don't know. As far as that's concerned, it's not in the King James Version of the Bible. So Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. Adam then blames God, basically, for all of it. Like, well, why'd you even tell us about it? Why'd you even put it in the garden? God is like, I literally gave you one rule. Just one. Just one rule, and you broke it. And so today, you die. And they're all in fear. While they didn't actually die, they died spiritually. They were cast out of the garden, and they were completely separated from God, right? That's a metaphorical death. They weren't completely separated from God, by the way. It was as if everything had just kind of changed. Death came into life at that point. Specifically because instead of letting them remain clothed with the fig leaves that they had found, God chose to kill a ram and then clothe them in the ram skin. God did that. And then he cast them out of the garden. And he put Yahweh. When I say God right now, I'm talking about Yahweh. Not my God. So then he put an angel with a fiery flaming sword in front of the gate to Eden, so that they could no longer enter Eden. And he cursed them with having to till the ground and labor in order to bring up food to eat. He was no longer just going to provide food. In the garden, everything grew itself and everything worked together for good, and nothing had died yet. None of the animals were eating each other or anything like that. But as soon as sin had come into the world, now suddenly they had to garden, they had to labor, they had to till the actual ground, they had to work for their food, and wait, for it to grow and do this whole process. There was now a whole process to things that had never existed. The concept of process had never existed prior. And they were cursed with pain and childbirth. So now they start bearing human children, and it's a painful process. Those are the curses, the processes. Now, they were still worshiping Yahweh, and they still had a relationship with Yahweh. But now Yahweh required sacrifices. They had eaten of that fruit, and now sacrifices were needed. And there's a lot of different stipulations as to what the fruit actually was. Was it actually like an apple, or, like a fruit like that? Or was it, I watched a documentary that believed that it was the orgasm, that they were only involved in tantric practices. This is a good one. They were only involved in tantric practices prior to committing the sin of orgasm. And she orgasmed, so then she caused him to orgasm. And because they were told, you don't go to the certain point. You don't eat that low hanging fruit, right? And then once they had orgasmed, they felt ashamed, which is like a common thing that happens, right? Not for me. I generally feel really good after I come, but that's because usually I'm not engaged in really bad things when I'm doing it. But there's that concept, right, that we're like not doing something we're supposed to be doing. And so then there's this shame that comes with orgasm. And that's why, so then they got cast out of the garden. They no longer had just innate access to the tantric practice. Now there's this whole process that followed, and there was all these different, other issues that came with now they had to provide for themselves, because before everything was energetic. Well, now they forced us into this physical world. And because they were forced into a physical world, then they started procreating human babies, which they had not done prior. And that concept has stuck with me because I literally, I don't have kids and I don't want kids of my own. It's not that I don't want them. I just don't feel like it's right for me to have children. To raise children, I think would be great. And I would love to do that. I think that I am skilled enough and loving enough, and I think that I would make a great mother. But I don't believe that I need to reproduce out of myself. I believe that reproducing out of myself may, and maybe it's because of this documentary I watched at a very particular time in my life when I was being brainwashed, but it stuck with me for sure. And I really do kind of feel like it would be sinful for me to have kids of my own, but particularly in this time and place for this reason. If you're really such a good parent, and if you really have so much to offer in the way of parenting, there's already plenty of kids that need parents. Their parents were on drugs, their parents died, their parents were never there, all these different things, right? If it was just about the parenting, if it was just about you being a good person, wanting to help people to become good people in the future, trying to make the world a better place, if that's really what it was all about, you would just adopt. That's where we're at right now. There's way too many kids without parents, and there's the capacity to be able to raise other people's kids. So, that. The only reason that we're trying to clone ourselves and that we want it to be ourselves is because we've convinced ourselves that that is the superior form of love and bonding. I just had a girl say it to me the other day, and it was one of those things where it was hard for me not to start off in a whole other direction because it was just a random little part of the conversation. But she was we were talking about somebody who had wasn't able to have their own kids or something like that, and she was right, because it'd be harder to love them or whatever if they weren't, something like that. And it was just no, it's not even true. It's not. Maybe it is for most people. I don't know. That seems incredibly narcissistic to me. That seems really fucked up. And if that really is how people are, that seems fucked up to me. That's what I mean. I do think it's a point of narcissism, because I feel like I would struggle with my own children because I'd see myself in them, and I would want to hold them to the standards I hold myself to, which is the highest standard. And I feel like it's easier for me to love other people's kids freely and to nurture other people's kids and to care for other people's kids. In general, to care for people that are separated from me in that way, because I have extremely high expectations of myself and those that I keep close to me. When with others, I'm a little more empathetic and a little less domineering, right? That's why I don't have kids of my own, because I don't think that that would be a healthy environment, to be honest. I believe that if I am to care for children, I will be placed in a role to care for those children. And I have been placed in plenty of roles to care for plenty of children, and I have done my very best. That's good enough for me. And yeah, I haven't heard a single person yet be able to validate why it's not narcissistic to want to have your own children over adopting. It's easier. It's more convenient. Those aren't for me, those aren't guiding, those are excuses. Those are not guiding reasons to do anything. That isn't what's going to make the world a better place, is by replicating ourselves, especially if we're not perfect. If you and if you think you're perfect, that's where the narcissism comes in, because that's what's so fucked up. We can't even be in that place, right? So I don't know. I also have some extreme socialist views that we should just be raising families in a large community, and that our communities should be family oriented, and Maybe there's some communities that aren't family oriented, and those are for the people that don't have families that way, and that's all fine and dandy. But like in general, our society should very much be like trying to raise children into sustainable adults. But Christian conservatism, thinks that that's a problem, because who else could ever have claimed my children? These are my children and I have claimed them. I'm their master. I'm their God. And like that to me, like, is why this documentary kind of struck, because the sin was then in reproducing physically out of our own. Like, you can't reproduce without an orgasm. If a man isn't orgasming, and if you're only practicing tantric sex practices, you're both engaged in pleasure without reproduction. The second that you introduce orgasm, you're introducing the capacity to be able to reproduce physically. And at that point, you become God. You're made like a God, right? You're like God now. You're the one creating. You're the creator. You're the sustainer. You're the one in control of this new life. And you get to create a whole world where you're the one that rules everything. No wonder why so many people actually want to do it. Meanwhile, it does create death, because it just creates a cycle of karma where, like, every parent having kids is just like, you haven't done the work to properly heal yourselves. There's like it's not everybody. There is a fraction of people that are healing, that are healed, that are actively in a good practice with themselves, with keeping themselves actualized and with keeping themselves like sustainable. And that's why they want to reproduce, is in order to add on to that. But most people just trick themselves into thinking that that's what they're doing at best, when really, like, they've never gone back into their childhood to like truly know themselves. They've never like, interacted with their inner child. They don't have like a solid concept of their future. They are just having kids in hopes that somebody will take care of them in the future. And I think that is truly narcissistic. I think and it's manipulative and it's controlling, and I think it's the opposite of having an actual connection with God, in my personal opinion. I don't think that's why you have kids. I know that for generations that's why we've had kids. I know generally people have always had kids, especially when times are really hard. People tend to have more kids because you need people to work. You need to make sure at least a couple of them survive so that they can take care of things and everything. And that's our sense of legacy. I think it's a big clusterfuck that we keep feeding into. Even if it's not the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, even if that really isn't the orgasm, that really doesn't go into all of those things. I mean, I do think those things are valid, but even if it isn't that, like, we should still just take a little bit of a break and stop and look and see what the fuck. Because what we're doing has not been working for at least as long as we've had written history. So, Christians like to believe that the world is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Maybe 12,000, depends on who you ask. Not that old. Where your average, scientist or atheist would say that things are, at least a few billion years old, multiple millions of years old. It has to be a few billion because we already are aware of, galaxies millions of light years away. So, I mean, yeah, at least a couple billion. And I'm pretty sure that I remember seeing a thing that was like, we found some of the oldest artifacts. Now, this was years ago, but the concept was that some of the oldest artifacts that we found that seem to be man-made goes back as far as almost 2 billion years, which sounds crazy, but I think that this has all just been happening forever and will continue to happen forever, and that we just happen to be in a specific period of time that looks this way. I think it always looks different. I think that, it's just like kind of like string theory, kind of like there's all these different potentialities layered on top of each other, and we're living through all of them. So again, this is all just my opinion, right? But that's the concept that I had learned. Either way, it was being separated from God. Adam and Eve did not try to procreate until after they'd been separated from God. Separated in the sense that now they needed to sacrifice in order to atone for their sins, but they still communicated with Yahweh. And we know that particularly because of the Cain and Abel story. So Cain is born first and is claimed as, I think it's in maybe the end of Genesis 2, beginning of Genesis 3, but it might be as far as like 5, 6. I can't really remember offhand, and I don't have my Bible in front of me. I do have a Bible somewhere, though. Maybe I don't still have it. I do. I don't remember. I've had like 20 Bibles in my day. But I think they're all at my parents' house. My parents' house is what I should say. It's not their house. That's what I'm getting at. Anyways, so Cain is the firstborn of Adam and Eve, and then Abel is the secondborn. That's how the Bible states it. Now, what I was taught in Christian schools is that they were also having daughters, but that those weren't accounted for as far as most like ancient Hebrew texts were concerned. They only, when they did censuses and stuff like that, like when it talks about like Jesus in a crowd of 5,000, it was actually probably a crowd of more like 15,000, but they didn't count women and children. They only counted the head of the household. So single men are the head of their own household, married men are the head of their household. Seems strange to me. Seems kind of strange to me, especially because if that were the case, then like, why did Mary and Joseph and Jesus all have to travel to go to the census? I don't know, but that's what I was taught. And so that's, and so there was like this implied incest that happened in order to create people, but they're like, what did you expect? There's 2 initial people that start everything out. So eventually that's just what it's going to break down to, right? But like back then, because there wasn't anybody else, it wasn't like how it is now, where like incest is bad now because our genes are so diverse that it raises risks of birth defects and, different stuff like that. That's what I was taught. Which is weird because I've never seen incest more prevalent than I have within the Christian church as well. Or just like in Smallville, hick towns, I guess. Who am I to judge? But that was what I was taught. So there's Cain and Abel, okay? Cain is the firstborn. And as far as Yahweh was always concerned, the way he had it set was the firstborn is supposed to be the heir to any sort of inheritances, to any sort of inheritance, to any sort of anything. It's always supposed to go the oldest first, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and it's supposed to go down the line like that. That's how it works everywhere else in the Bible, except for some reason in this exact scenario. Weird. It's almost like Yahweh was setting it up. I don't know. But he made Cain, and he put Cain in position of of tending to the gardens, of being a gardener. That's what Cain was. And then Abel was the second oldest, was the youngest, and he was put as the shepherd. And those are the jobs that they had. Now Yahweh required sacrifice in order to atone for everyone's sins, which is also funny too, because like they were supposed to just commit the one sin, but like now they're just sinning all the time, I guess, and just have to sacrifice all the time, or like because sin has entered the world, now sacrifice is consistently needed. It wasn't enough just to kill the one ram and clothe their nakedness in the garden and then cast them out and then curse them. There's just like this constant atonement for sins that has to happen now. Okay. And what Yahweh requires is the best sheep of the entire flock. That's what he wants sacrificed. That's the only acceptable sacrifice. That's what he finds to be an acceptable sacrifice, the best sheep of the flock. You give him your very best, the best of the best, and then the next time there has to be a sacrifice, you have to give him the next one that's best, okay? However, he also required that both Cain and Abel performed sacrifices. And since Abel was the shepherd and Cain was the gardener, Cain was expected to use the second best sheep of Abel's flock in order to sacrifice to Yahweh. Which means that every single time they had a sacrifice, Cain's sacrifice was considered second best and was considered like less than perfect every single time, because but what was explained to me was because that's what Yahweh had asked for, that was his requirement, and so if Cain would have just kept doing that, it would have been sufficient. That's all that he was being asked. But this made Cain very bitter, because he was the oldest, and he didn't understand why he was constantly getting shit on when he was the oldest. If anybody should be getting shit on, it should be Abel. He wasn't even questioning the way that Yahweh had things set, aside from the fact that Yahweh made him the gardener and made Abel the shepherd. Why would you do that? Why would you do that if you say that the firstborn is supposed to receive all of the good and that the firstborn is supposed to be the one commanding all of these things, and you want the first main sheep of the flock? Why are you giving me second best every time? But God wouldn't give him an answer. So then Cain decides to take it upon himself and to give Yahweh the best of his best. Okay? He takes all of the best of his garden and all of the best that he's taken all this time to grow. Now, mind you, Abel ain't even doing shit but making sure that the sheep don't get eaten. Guess he probably has to shear them. I don't know, because at this point, apparently there weren't any weapons. So they didn't have a knife. I guess maybe he used some sort of hoe. I don't really know, because of course it gets really wild. There's a lot of different logical fallacies here already happening. He had to help birth the sheep, I assume. But yeah, God had obviously played favorites, and that's what it definitely felt like to Cain. So he decided, well, I'm just going to give you the best of my best. That's what you get. It's the very best that I have to give you. And how do you receive it? And God did not like it. God doesn't like vegetables. God likes meat. Yahweh doesn't want your burnt incense, okay? Yahweh wants flesh and blood. Which is another thing, because they mention Elohim later on in the Bible, and Elohim is the one that actually likes burnt incense, not Yahweh. Yahweh likes dead babies. Keep that in mind. Anyways, it's true though. Yahweh's just the worst. I'll get into it. So Cain is bitter and mad. God spits at his offering. How dare you? How dare you not do what I requested and take second best? Just accept that you're second best, Cain. Abel's my favorite. You're the second best. This is what I have set. I'm God, so I get to say whatever is whatever. I get to do whatever I want, and you guys are supposed to deal with it. I'm already mad at your mom and dad for not listening, and now you're not going to listen? Who the fuck do you think you are? Probably not. It's not like the apple ever fell far from the tree, right? But this is all, now it's Cain's fault. Now this is Cain's fault. How dare he? And so God doesn't bless his sacrifice, and he blesses Abel's sacrifice. And Abel's like, Cain, you're an idiot. God already told you what you were supposed to do. Why won't you just accept that you're not as good as me? God likes me best. I imagine that Abel was just such a punk. Not that I think that what Cain did was right or validatable, truly, because I don't. That's not in my heart to become a sadist just because sadistic things have been done to me. But I do get it. I mean, I do understand the concept. So yeah, Cain gets pissed. He gets pissed. He feels like there's just a complete injustice happening. Also, like, the only bitches to bang are his sisters. So, like, he's probably not too happy about that. But none of those women are mentioned at this point either, to be clear. And no concept of like them being with any sort of woman is mentioned at this point either. For all they know, this is supposed to just be their lives for the rest of forever. Until they die, I guess. I don't know if they know that they're going to die yet or not. They were told that they would die in the garden if they ate of the fruit. But then they didn't die, and they were just cursed and separated from God. So it seemed a lot more metaphorical. So I don't know if they realized that they were going to die, especially because at this point, Adam and Eve are like 400-something years old. Cain and Abel are probably close to 100. Who knows? We always imagine them being like teenagers or in their early 20s or in their 30s or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that they were older than that this had been going on a very long time already. I think Adam lived to be about 500, 600, something like that, according to the Bible. So Cain's pissed, and Abel's being a dick about it, right? I don't know if he was, but I assume that he was. Either way, Cain's pissed. And he's pissed because he's like, I don't know. Abel is always the one that gets to kill the sheep, and Cain doesn't get to do any of the killing, so he decides he's just going to kill Abel. What really happened was that they were fighting in the fields, so yeah, Abel was being a dick. Abel was being a dick the way that most younger brothers will be to their older brothers. Kind of a long-running story, right? Kind of always just the way it's always been. So they're fighting, they're arguing. Cain's probably like, dude, you're just because this is position. Cain's trying his best to be. I imagine Cain trying his best to be like as faithful as possible, and being like, wait, so you're trying to give him plants, and then being like, I was just trying to give him the best. I was trying to give him my best, not your best, not your second best. I wanted to give him the best that I had to give him. And he's like, yeah, well, that's not what he wanted. What he wanted was my second best, because I'm better than you. Cain was like, oh, really, motherfucker? And picked up a rock and hit him in the head and killed him. And he hides, because now he's scared. Nobody's been murdered yet, so this is weird. Not sure if he even realized that was what was going to happen. He just kind of did like the toddler thing of hitting because he was super mad. Suddenly he realizes, oh shit, something bad happened. Abel's not waking up, and God's gonna come later this evening like he does every evening, and he's gonna, want us to talk to him, and I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. So he tries to hide. So God comes like he does. Yahweh comes like he does. He already knows, just like Adam and Eve. He already knows. What you doing back there, Cain? Cain's like, oh, nothing. I'm not doing nothing. Now he's like, oh, really? Where's your brother Abel? Cain's like, what, am I my brother's keeper? I don't know. I'm not in control of him. He's a grown man. He can do whatever he wants. I don't know. God's like, oh, is that so? Then, ends up pointing out that he knows what Cain has done, and that Cain committed murder, which is not okay. I know that I've been asking you guys to kill innocent sheep, but this justified murder, unacceptable. I'm God, okay? I get to make the rules around here, not you. Quit making your own decisions. God was real serious about it. Yahweh was like, you guys better stop thinking for yourselves. I don't like it. That's not why I made you. In fact, I made you for the opposite of that. I did not make you to think for yourselves, and I don't know why you guys keep trying to. I don't like it. So he cursed Cain, put a mark on his forehead, like Harry Potter, and then sent him to the land east of Nod. This is in the Bible. He sent him to the land east of Nod, okay? Where there was already a civilization of people that, by Yahweh's own reference, were pagan people. A pagan people that worshipped other gods that weren't Yahweh. And Yahweh's like, these people are fucking demonic. And then he sent Cain there. And then he said, if any of these people take you in, they're cursed. And the people there being decent and not worshiping Yahweh did take Cain in. They heard his story, they saw that he had been marked, and they took him in. So those people became cursed. And apparently those people are the ones that, they had weapons, they had war, they had learned all of these, different types of medicines, different types of, it's all witchcraft. It's all witchcraft. And they learned it all from their gods. They're more ancient gods than Yahweh. Which is not mentioned, but literally kind of it's definitely inferred, and it's obviously mentioned. Yahweh sends Cain to the land east of Nod with a curse that if anybody there takes him in, they also will be cursed. But who the fuck are all these people? If Adam and Eve are the first people in the world, and Cain and Abel are their firstborn children, and the only other people that have existed at this point are all of the unnamed daughters that they supposedly had, who are these active people that have already been living east of Nod, that already have their own set up belief systems based on gods that are separate from Yahweh? Interesting enough, I believe that those people probably worshiped the pantheon Elohim, the creator god, and Yahweh, this little demon god, matrix maker. They were like, fuck that guy. He was like, no, fuck you guys. Now I'm going to set up enmity between your line and my line forever. That's what Yahweh said. Because you took Canaan, now there's going to be enmity between the line of Cain and the line of Abel. And then he created Seth. Then Eve gave birth to Seth, their third child, their third son. They had daughters, apparently. But their third son, Seth. And he was the new Abel. And he was the one that was now going to take on the chosen line of Yahweh. And all of Cain's, anybody that bore children with Cain, and anybody that, all of the people that were bearing children that had taken Cain in, their line, completely separate. Those aren't the chosen people. Abel is the chosen people. The chosen people being Israel. Okay, so now we have the chosen people, and that's all it took. Now that is the excuse as to why the Israelites always have this Yahweh over them, lording over them, waging war against other people for their name's sake, right? And it's totally justified and totally valid because, I guess just because Yahweh said so. Yahweh gets what he wants. He's a very jealous God. He's a bitter, jealous God. He admits that himself. And he's the only one. He's the top one. Yeah, there's other gods. They're mentioned in the Bible. There's all these other gods, but they're like little gods. Yahweh's the only one true God. And he's the most powerful. And he's the best. And if you don't believe that, he's going to kill you. He's going to curse you, and he's going to damn you to hell. Of course, that doesn't come around yet. That for some reason only comes around later on, towards Jesus' time. No, the fear up until Jesus wasn't of hell. The fear was of Yahweh. That Yahweh was going to fucking destroy you. He was destroying generations of people. He was genociding people. Killing innocent babies. Having people eat babies. He's a sick God. But that's Yahweh, and he's very proud of it. He's a peacemaker. Yahweh. That's where all of the manipulation and stuff from the Bible comes from. It's fucking Yahweh. So, oh, and I know, I'm sorry, this is probably extremely offensive to people that worship Yahweh. I want to tell you, your God is the most offensive thing that's existed in the last fucking 8,000 years. And I don't see y'all apologizing. So yeah, so that's weird. And then after that, it talks about there being the men in Genesis 6. It talks about there being, that was the time, during the separation and everything, and then these civilizations start getting developed. The civilization of Yahweh's chosen people versus the civilization of Cain's lineage. And that during that time is when there were the men of renown, and that is when the Nephilim walked the earth, and there were giants in those days. Those are all kind of mentioned as separate things. I've heard different stories about those, like the Nephilim being demigods that were, so like it was apparently, now this isn't in Genesis, I think that when it talks about, well, I think it talks about it in Revelation, but I think it might also talk about it in like Joshua, when Lucifer gets cast out of heaven and a third of the angels are cast with him. And then apparently Lucifer, right, that gets cast out of heaven becomes Satan and is the king of this world. Well, that's weird, because I thought Yahweh was the king of this world. Because Yahweh is the one true God, and Yahweh is literally Lord and Master. And Yahweh is the one that, like, obviously is walking around like a fucking roaring lion seeking whom he can devour. And if you don't submit to him, then you're damned for eternity. I thought that was Yahweh. But no, apparently it's Lucifer, and apparently that's Satan, and they're all, well, Satan and Lucifer are the same person, the way that it's taught in churches, most Christian churches. That Lucifer is just another name for Satan. However, Lucifer means morning star, and Jesus himself is referred to a couple different times as the morning star, both the morning and the evening star. So there's weird discrepancies there. There's theories that Lucifer and Jesus are brothers, or that they're like the antithesis of one another. And that goes then into Revelation being like the Antichrist. But see, that's a whole nother concept, is the Antichrist. Okay? So as far as my theory of everything is concerned. Okay, well I'll talk about the Antichrist, and then I'll talk about why these things are used the way that they're used. So the Antichrist is referenced mostly in the New Testament. I don't know if there is any references even in the Old Testament. I think in the Old Testament, the only thing that's prophesied is the Savior. And that once Jesus comes, he kind of starts teaching this Antichrist, this concept. Because Jesus himself says that once I leave here, even now, and once I leave here until I return again, there will be many Antichrists. Even now there are. And they will kind of all converge into the true Antichrist spirit that will come in the form of a man, whose number is 666. That those that understand those things can count that and know what that means. And that the seat of his throne will be in Turkey, Siberia, something like that. Turkey area, somewhere in Turkey, something like that. Yeah, Constantinople, like somewhere, I don't know if Constantinople, Istanbul. It's not Constantinople anymore. What am I, a Roman? That area. It's apparently where the seat of the Antichrist is, which has been referred to in theories as it's like the Vatican, essentially. Wherever the Vatican is, like that kind of just happens to be exactly where the seat of the Antichrist is supposed to be. Weird. Also weird that the Pope's like new throne in the Vatican cathedral, the whole cathedral was redone to look like a fucking serpent, like a snake head, and you enter its mouth, and deep in its throat is the stage in which the Pope sits, and the Pope sits on a throne, which is already just fucking ridiculous. And just so against the Bible, it's crazy. But, and I can't remember if this is, I think it was the last Pope whose throne had an upside down cross on it. I don't know what this throne looks like, but I know that behind the throne is what is referenced as a depiction of Jesus, I believe, coming up out of hell after defeating death. Like once he had been killed, once he had been crucified, he supposedly went to hell and for 3 days and defeated death, and then he rose up out of that. So it's supposed to be this depiction of the resurrection of Jesus, and that he's like, coming up out of hell, and that's why there's all these other weird, scary, demonic figures around him. But the figure itself looks quite scary. Does not look pleasant, doesn't look victorious in the sense of like Jesus, like we think of. It looks very much like, I would imagine, like a beast-like human character that's been entrapped for 1,000 years, that's finally getting released, that's bringing hell with them. It's kind of what it looks like. My personal opinion. You can find a lot of stuff about that. But yeah, the Vatican's fucking wild. Nothing about it is sacred or good at all. They have like all of these historic, like, they have so much of history in the Vatican, like storage. What is that called? The vaults. It's inaccessible. You have to have like this certain clearance, and it's not just like a regular like political clearance or regular like military clearance. It's like also like a clerical, it's like this whole thing. And like not even the Pope apparently knows all of the things that are in there. Like supposedly that's where the Ark of the Covenant is and all of this different stuff. I personally think that the Bible, I know I'm all over the place, y'all are just gonna have to deal with it. I personally think that the Bible is far more metaphorical than technical, and that it was, I think that the sacred texts that the Bible was conceived of held their own sanctity, particularly in the time that they were written and for the people that they were written to. But I think that the canonization of the Bible and then the translations of the Bible and the propagating it through the Crusades all over the world, and it's, now being propagated through politics and media in the world and through churches and all of these control tactics and stuff like that to keep it like a thing. And the weird way that conservative Christianity like upholds Zionist ideals and worships Israel as the motherland, but under Zionistic ideals, like with the Star of David and shit, because none of that's truly Israeli. Like none of that's truly like Semitic. It's actually anti-Semitic, and that's always been a cause of discourse in that area, is because of the way that it's been placed up against those people. And it's claimed, according to the Bible, like we just said, that it's because there's the lines of Cain and there's the lines of Abel. And like, then that breaks down into like the 12 tribes of Israel and like all of this different, it's not just prophetic, but like all of this different historical shit that goes into that. ultimately what's going on is that the Zionists that constructed that entire story, that canonized those things, that like the Sanhedrin and shit, that canonized the Bible, and like the ways that it's been propagated throughout the world, and the ways that it's continued to be propagated throughout the world through missions and all of this type of thing, and the close affiliation that Israel has with conservative Christianity, and the way that like America pays for everything for Israel, even though like we're supposed to be scared that Israel can't take care of itself. Israel can take care of itself and can take care of a lot more, and does. Like, all of that is literally just a manifest destiny. The Bible was used as a script to brainwash the people into believing that these Zionists are the true chosen, when truly the only chosen are those that are truly of God, Elohim, the actual creator. Not those born, I mean, the creator accepts all, to be honest, even Adam and Eve. But these fake people that were created into the matrix and that now sustain this matrix system and have paraded it through the world in the name of victimization and codependency, and have created this extremely codependent, lack mentality, victimized, narcissistic system that is prevalent throughout most of the world, throughout pretty much all of the world. You know, the only strongholds that aren't being dominated and domineered by Christianity are they're just having to fight against it. This has been a long-running play, very intentional, and like I said, it's a manifest destiny to put a very specific group of people, a very specific bloodline, into a very specific role. All they need is the validation that this is what's been said since the beginning. This is what our God says. This is what our God has said since the beginning. The Bible itself says that Yahweh was not the first God. That Adam and Eve weren't the first people. It doesn't come right and say that. It just infers it by explaining the people east of Eden and the rest of the people, and how there's always all these separate different people. And really, the chosen people are actually just this small, tiny little group of elitists that are always protected by their God to get to this point where now the Antichrist comes, who's against those people, right? It's not like he's been chosen by those people. It's not like he's from that bloodline. It's not like he's been trained by those people. It's not like he's part of the whole thing, right? No, he's against these people, and he's actually coming to separate all of those things, and he's going to be the one that brings everybody, into this new world order. It is the Zionists that have been trying to do that all along. That's what's so crazy about it. And even in Revelation, it talks about these people pretending to be the chosen people, but really they're just the synagogue of Satan. And even that, I know Satanists that are better Christians than a lot of the Christians I know, to be honest. They treat their neighbors better. They're stronger in their theology. They have way stronger faith. They actually take care of their kids. They're not fucking abusive narcissists. And don't get me wrong, I've met plenty of people in the church that are good people, and they really are trying their best, and they really are trying to do good things. And I've met plenty of people that are searching, and they're finding those things, and they're clinging to those things out of a belief that really is the best. The best thing for them, the best thing for everybody. I just think that these people aren't awake, and that they're not thinking truly for themselves. And I don't blame them. I believe that when this country was founded, just like with Israel, this country has always had these ties with Israel for a reason, and that this country specifically was founded in 1776. This country was already around long before that. The continent itself was already populated long before the country was founded, and there was already a system at play prior to the conservative founding of this country in 1776. Okay. But since that point in time, which I'm pretty sure, wasn't that right around the time that the Illuminati disbanded? Anyways, there's literally been a cabal of a specific bloodline that has been working through all of these politics, all of these banking systems, all of these political systems, all of these military systems, all of these systems of control, all of these social systems, all of working into sciences, into the AI and everything like that to develop the exact system in which we exist, to place themselves in the exact role of being in power. And they're there already. They're there already. We're just watching it happen. Like, that's what I mean by the manifest destiny. Like, they already preset it. They already did it. They already wrote the script. They already acted out, have all the players set. It didn't matter if it was Obama, if it was Trump, if it was Bush. Didn't matter if it was Hillary. Didn't matter if it was Biden. Didn't matter if it was... It doesn't... They're all the same people. They're all part of the same family. They're all related. Did you know that fucking... What's that dude's name? That actor... He was in American Beauty and he got in trouble for molesting little boys. You know who I'm talking about. I can't think of his name right now. Did you know that he's related to every single American president? Now, most of them were already related, and that kind of has already come out before, but there was like maybe 8 to 12 that like weren't, and people were like, oh, that makes it okay. Those were the good guys. They're all fucking related. They've all been parts of the same club. It didn't matter if they were trying to do that and trying to follow those things just so that they could get in a certain position to try to bring people the truth and then got assassinated for it. That's still part of the story. That's still part of this manifest destiny. All of that has been preset. Those people were still just playing roles. We have not had a good president. This is all a game. It's all a game. We're not even pawns in the game. We're the fucking bystanders that get to just deal with the consequences of whatever happens in the game. Right? Like, we're the fucking houses and shit that you buy in Monopoly, not the actual pawns moving along the board. And it all ties into itself. They all tie into each other. It's not like a surprising thing that all of these people who claim to be Christian and who support Israel are also like involved in like this weird occult Satanist stuff. That's not weird at all. That's all part of it. It's all the same shit. It's all the same shit. And like I said, like I know Satanists that are good people. Like there's all these different concepts as to what those things are. There's people that are just trying to be decent people and they're trying to fight these types of systems and they call themselves those things or they fall into those things, right? The same goes for Christians though. I'm not saying these please stop identifying yourself by these things. That would make everything so much easier, because if you look at these things at the core without identifying people by these things, you would understand how fucked up everything is, and people wouldn't be taking personal offense to it. People are only taking personal offense when they consider their actual identity as part of that. If I'm talking about Christianity and you're offended because you're a Christian, you are absolutely brainwashed. That's just how it works. That's just how it works. If I'm, a Democrat or a Republican and you're talking bad about either of those parties, like, why would I be personally offended by that? I should be able to be like, well, that's not what I believe, or I understand those things, but I chose to believe these things. Like, what a weird, quit identifying yourselves with these labels, please. Please quit, because it's just wrecking us. It's the same thing with the trans thing. Like, now it's become this popular thing, and now it's like this push for like people to not just be able to embrace themselves and their gender identity from even a very young age, but this push that means that then you have to get on hormones, and then you have to like start dressing a certain way, and then you have to get this certain surgery to validate the genitals that we're swearing we don't identify people by. Quit falling for the illusions. You don't have to go get surgery to be who you really are. Just be who you really are. If people don't want to accept it, fuck them. Fuck them. Just keep being you. Just keep being you, whatever that is. But you don't need this external validation. And please stop telling yourself that you do. Because as long as you do, you're going to keep seeking it, and you're going to keep supporting these systems that are just trying to kill you. They're trying to kill you. They're trying to make it so that you can't look at yourself in the mirror anymore and say, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm proud of myself. They're trying to convince you that you're something outside of yourself. They're trying to convince you that, no, you're a Christian, which means you have to follow these certain standards. You're black, that means you have to follow these certain standards. You're a woman, that means you have to follow these certain standards. It's all bullshit. You're a human being. You are free. You are free. You are free. Do what you want. Not whatever you want. Do what is right for you. Do what is best for you. Don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about the people that want to have some issue with it when it doesn't affect them. Fuck them. Care for yourself. Love yourself. Give yourself what you really need. If you're looking at the camera, love yourself. Give yourself what you really need. You are free. You are free. You don't have any chains. The sound of the chains in your head is the sound of the chains that your ancestors had that we have spent years breaking. They aren't there anymore. All that's there is this illusion. All of this is just an illusion. Get rid of it. Fuck it. Get rid of all of it. You don't need to abide by any of those things. If you really are a good person, you don't need that identification to prove it. Just be a good person. If you really are a woman, you don't need to validate that. Just be it. If you really are these things, you don't need the external validation. Just be you. You are important. You, as an individual, are necessary, essential to this entire conglomerate that we have. It wouldn't be this entire conglomerate if it weren't for you as much as it is for anyone else. Don't worry about anybody else. Worry about you. Because otherwise, you're just giving validation that there should be somebody outside of you controlling you, validating you, and that is not true. That is not true. This sick codependency that we have built into this society needs to stop. And we are the ones responsible for propagating it and continuing to support it. We have to stop. We have to stop looking for a savior. We have to stop looking for a master. We have to stop looking for our chains. Those things do not exist. We are it. We're it. And we're free. And we can do as we please. We don't need to ask permission. You know, if everybody really were trying to do their very best that way, I don't think that we would have the issues that we have. So many. And I studied psychology, not in school. I studied it in my own self. I studied it in my own family. I studied it in my own personal relationships. And what I have found is that, as far as I'm concerned, and I've had people rape me. I've had people try to kill me. I've had people, wish extremely ill on me. And those people weren't monsters. Those people were hurt. Those people were fucked up. Those people were so lost. You know, they don't know themselves. They think that those are the things that are going to gain them power. They think that those are the things that are going to make them free. They're already free. If they could just embrace that they're already free, they wouldn't have to do those things. But what they see is they see me being free, and they don't understand how I got there when they have this and they have that, and I don't have this and I don't have that, so what the fuck? Well, what the fuck? I'm not the one dictating these things. You have to be able to do the work to go into yourself to recognize, why is it that I don't feel free? Why is it that I don't feel validated as a man, woman, child, whatever? If that's what you want, go into yourself. You quit doing those things externally, because we're fucking everything up. We really are. We're just supporting these systems that have no place. They have no place. And that's why everything is so chaotic. And that's why this family and these specific bloodlines are able to have control over us, because we don't know our own bloodlines. We don't know our own history. We don't communicate with our own ancestors. We don't know ourselves. In fact, we're spending our time and our days and our energy and our power asking them to tell us who we are, to validate who we are, to pay for who we are. You don't need the big house to feel safe. You don't need the family to feel loved. You don't need a perfect partner to feel valid. You don't need, a penis to feel like it's okay to be dominant. You don't need a vagina to feel like it's okay to be vulnerable. You don't need anything outside of yourself. When you can be okay with yourself, then do as you please. Do whatever the fuck you want. You are free to. But don't think that seeking these external things is doing anything but validating these external systems that are set on stealing our power, on convincing us that our power is anywhere else but within us. The power of God is within you. God, Creator God, Elohim, that's us. That's the conglomerate, creative force of energy that exists at any moment, any given time, any day. There is no beginning or end to it. There is no, it just exists and always has been and always will. That's within us. Yahweh can fuck off. Okay? Don't worry about the name of your God. Okay? I can only talk on Yahweh. I can't talk on Allah. I can't talk on, I don't think Buddha's not a god. And, like Krishna, Vishnu, like those types of things, those have different concepts to them. I don't think that it's wrong to learn about any of these things. I don't think it's wrong to appeal to any of these types of things. I think when you know yourself truly, and when you go through the process of getting to know yourself truly, any of number of these things could be what actually serves you to find your purpose. I don't want to deter people from doing what is necessary to find themselves. If what you need is the crutch of religion in order to find your truest self, by all means. By all means. But please recognize that it is a tool and a crutch. It is not your identity. Please recognize that politics is just a tool. Please recognize that these things are just crutches. Please recognize that the job, the money, the success, the fame, that those things are just tools for you to come into alignment with who you perceive your highest self to be. And you don't actually need those things if you truly know yourself. Those things can help, but if you start to identify yourself by those things, you will lose yourself. And you are not worth being lost. You are not lost. You just need to get back into yourself. Quit believing all the bullshit. Quit believing all the bullshit. You're not lost. You're right the fuck here. Right now. For real. That's it. That's all there is. That's all there needs to be. We don't need to do whatever we do for an afterlife when we can't even just be in our own skin right here and now. Who cares what you did in the past? Don't do it anymore. Do different now. Be better now. You can literally wake up today, tomorrow, and be however you want to be, whoever you want to be. You just have to be willing to. You have to be willing to put away all of the bullshit that's trying to tell you who and what you are. And this society will do that if you let it. This entire system is set in order to try to convince you that you are something less than that you are, and that you are less capable than you are, and that they have the answers that you don't. It's not true, especially now. There was a very long time where this bloodline hid what we call the occult, that it hid secrets, hidden concepts, hidden understandings, beliefs, hidden truths. They were hidden. It was only for those that could gain a certain status in order to be able to understand. Only those that fucked enough goats, right? But that's not the world we live in anymore. So please quit doing those things to yourself. I don't give a fuck what you have done. I don't care what you woke up and did this morning. I care where you're at right now. I care where you're at tomorrow. And if you're not where you need to be by those times, then fuck it. I just care that you get there. And if you don't, that's your choice. And you are free to whatever choice you want to make. But please at least recognize that you're free. That you're free to make those choices. You want to wear those chains? Then wear those chains. They're yours to wear. That's your choice. You want to have a master? Then have a master. But recognize that it's your choice, not your identity, right? Sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. People need to hear these things more. We don't hear these things enough. We don't say these things enough to each other. It should not seem so profound for somebody to say these things. to be able to look at you and say these things. I want people looking each other in the eyes in real life, in person, where they can touch and feel each other and cry with each other and care for each other, and to be able to say these things and to remind each other of these things, and for the world to change out of this enslaved system, because we are so much greater than what we are being convinced of, and we are capable of so much more than what we are settling for. Our lives are not meant to be on this weird timeline of working ourselves to death just to afford a house over our heads or food in our bellies, like, you know, the comforts of day-to-day living, and that, like, if you work hard enough, strive hard enough, sell yourself enough, that you can obtain, you know, your greatest fantasies, which are still just material things. That's not what this is about. You don't need all those material things to feel the ways that you want to feel. I promise you. I promise you, you will feel so much better about yourself if you let go of the concepts that you need those material things and just embrace yourself fully as you are. Suddenly, it doesn't matter if you make that million or not. It doesn't matter if you get that surgery or not. It doesn't matter if that person validates you or not, because you're good. You're good. You're free. You're happy. Who gives a fuck? That's the world we live in. That's the world I want to see more of. But each and every one of us, our power is that powerful. Truly, each and every one of us is responsible for creating this reality that we exist within. And if each and every one of us is more given to illusion than to the reality of our freedom, then the illusion is what persists. We don't want that. I hear all the time, I hear everywhere I go, all I hear is that people don't want that. Then quit supporting it. Please take the time to meditate, to look into yourself, to become truly introspective, to really know yourself, to truly know who you really are, what you really want, what it is you're really doing, why, and to be willing to do the work to get to those places, to do those things. Stop making the excuses. I don't care what your boss says. I don't care what the bills say. I don't care what your ex says. You know, like, if people aren't actively supporting you, you don't need people. And I'm not saying turn into a major asshole and just say fuck everybody, but I keep everybody at arm's length. And I do it for a reason. I do it to keep myself full. I don't want people in my space taking from me when they don't even know themselves. And then they start taking from me what it is that they want for themselves, not willing to recognize that they already have it if they would just receive it unto themselves. If you can see it in me, it's already yours. You know, there's no reason to be jealous of me for fucking anything. For literally anything. Anything that I can do, anyone can do. I promise. But you have to do it. That's the difference. I'm doing this. I'm actively here doing this. Saying these things, feeling these ways, living this way. You know, and like the rewards that I have are what I have for me to be able to validate those things. But there's an energy transference that goes so much deeper than this material reality that proves beyond the matter of a doubt the reality in which I speak. It's in you. It's in you. You feel it. And I know that you do. I don't know you. I don't know who's listening to this. But I know that when I talk to people, when I look people like straight in the eye, when I look people in the face and I'm able to say very real things to them, it resonates with them. And I've had way more people than I've ever been comfortable with tell me how, you know, they've never had somebody talk to them so intimately and to share such a deep connection with them. Honestly, if I made the point to meet a new person every single day, I would hear it every single day. Every time I meet a new person, I hear it. Every time. I also hear it from people that I've known over an extended period of time too. All of it breaks my heart. Because there is nothing that I'm capable of that anyone else isn't capable of. It's just that I'm actually doing that work. I really am actually trying to connect on that deep level. If it's really what you say that you want, if you want it bad enough to be jealous, just do the work. Just do the work. Let go of the bullshit. You don't even got to do that much work. So much of the work is just letting go of the bullshit. You know, I like learning these things about history and learning these things about society and psychology and the way that it all works together. And I grew up learning conspiracies, from the time I was 8. Like, it's been pumped into me. So, I find these things intriguing, and I've learned a lot, so I can understand a lot. And there's a lot that I could talk about and share, but ultimately it always keeps coming down to just like the reality of things, because so much of those things I'm talking about is just the matrix illusion in which we exist. And hopefully it helps to point some of those things out so that people can recognize the chains that are keeping them. But those chains don't actually exist, right? The second you acknowledge them and the second you call them by what they really are, illusions, they won't hold the same power in your life anymore. And you can move on past them, and you can embrace yourself, and you can become fully empowered. You're not going to find that power in a book. You're not going to find that power watching videos on YouTube. You're not going to find that power, in somebody else behind a pulpit, in certain church groups, or, in whatever flags it is you're trying to fly. It's in you. It's in you. You have to dig deep. Don't ask me what that means or how deep. Ask you. Ask you. And then do it. Just keep asking yourself. Don't look for answers outside of yourself. They're not there. You're not there. You're not outside of yourself. You're right here. In yourself, in your active moment. The only reason you feel outside of yourself ever is because you're validating yourself by external, things, by external circumstances, and by the external reality. It is a manifestation of your internal. That's it. So when you are right with yourself, everything else will be right with you. I promise. For me, it took a long time. I imagine that for most people, it honestly wouldn't even take that long. I think most people just don't get access to these communications. They feel afraid to say these things that they feel deep down. And until that inner person is actually validated, they're too afraid to step into it, and thus to step out of these illusions. Don't be afraid, please. If anything, do not be afraid. There's nothing to fear. You are the power of God in manifest. You just have to live like it. You just have to receive that. You have to embrace it. You have to believe it. This was supposed to be a series. I don't know. I'll probably get into talking. I'm supposed to be talking about my whole time space theory. So I will get into this more. But I'm going to leave it here for right now, so that those things can soak in. Okay. Love you.